Good morning, Michael.
Good morning.
Morning, John and Mike.
Hello.
Hello.
So are any of you guys planning to go to the regional summit at the end of the month in Dublin?
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't make it.
No?
No, this is Mike converted. No, I'm not. I'm here in the States. I went to the one in San Jose, but we do have a couple of folks back. We have a booth there
Okay.
over to showing some of our thermal and power products.
Yeah, I'm going as I'm with a new company now.
Yeah, I would have liked to have gone, but since we have folks in Europe,
Yeah,
it was more appropriate for them to go.
of course. So I've seen some emails come across from OCP about webinars that they're hosting on stuff. Have you guys taken advantage of any of those yet, or know of them?
No.
Yeah. I have to go back and look at that. Sounds like there's some stuff related to storage or that's the one I remember at this point. Might want to look that up on the website at OCP and see what webinars they're going to be presenting in the in the near future here. I think they're doing some more of that in terms of just online education and interaction with a broader audience instead of just doing the the kind of the project meetings. They'll do OCP wide webinar on various topics.
Thanks
Hey,
for the
great.
tip.
Yeah. Do you know much about the webinars that are recording? Thank you for joining today. We were just talking about the regional summit in Dublin coming up at the end of the month. Also, John, any updates on your end from the last EDGE meeting before we dive into the one topic I have today? So the topic I have today is actually looking at deployment environments in some detail and figuring out if
well, I thought that we were doing this on the EDGE call on the 8th. Like I wasn't aware that we were having this call today even. I thought it had been removed from the calendar. I was quite surprised.
There you go.
I thought we had, but yeah.
Yeah, so did you try to get us down to one meeting a month between EDGE and
Yeah, that was the thing. And I think you brought up at the last EDGE call that this topic, but yeah. I mean, it's fine. We'll do it. We can do it both if you don't mind.
No, not at all. I think
Might give us a little bit of get some more input and stuff in between.
Yep.
Sweet.
So that was kind of the agenda for today. If no other questions or comments, let me go ahead and share that, and we can start the discussion here. So you can see the kind of the matrix I put together here. Along the top row or the columns are basically different deployment environments. And then down column A is different attributes that are worth consideration when we look at those environments from a product design standpoint. Let me just run across the top here real quickly. Data center here is for reference. So as far as my interest in this, I consider, I think I used in my email the term connected edge, for lack of a better term. And the idea is that we have these big cloud data centers, and kind of everything else is end up providing a path to those cloud data centers. In the current generation of internet application connectivity and such. And so, what are those other environments? And going across, obviously, enterprise is a traditional environment. And then telco, there were several ones that have to do with kind of that the telco installations. Telco indoor, this is central office or remote central office. So
Hey, Lauren.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can we talk in while you're presenting? Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So I think between enterprise and the telco, we need. I think it would be good to have a like a retail edge.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could put it at the end. I was thinking of trying to see if we could go in order of like sizes, or you know what I mean? Because the retail edge is an edge case. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, all right.
I can put it at the end now, and we can rearrange
Yeah,
it.
we can rearrange them. Yeah. Okay.
Good comment. Telco has kind of these 4 different areas, I think. Telco, central office, remote central office, which is like sometimes I know telcos that have buried, basically big rooms underground, and they operate as a remote central office. Then there's kind of the telco outdoor cabinet section, which is one climate controlled, one partially climate controlled, and one uncontrolled. Some of this was taken from documents related to NEB's compliance or summary of NEB compliance kind of environments. And then factory warehouse, maybe that's 2, maybe that's 1. And then a hospital research, just as a category that I know nothing about. And then retail edge, we can put out there and say it.
So for that, like the hospital research, would we also put like campus on that? Yeah, because those are kind of campus area things. Is that what you're thinking for that?
I was thinking more stringent requirements in some attributes and stuff. So it may not be temperature, but I think hospitals have very strict requirements on.
Okay, so well, should we make so in the enterprise, were you thinking a central site with hub sites that would be the branch remote office?
Yeah, enterprise would be kind of a office environment with both, a center or a headquarters and remote sites. It may include like indoor closets, maybe. I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Yeah. Okay. So I wonder if we should have a 2-level hierarchy, so we could have like enterprise, and then have headquarter branch, and then
so
one big thing for telco, and then a CO, remote, climate control, class 1, 2, 3. even maybe break that down as like a edge or something. And there's in the edge, we have had the idea of a far edge, a regional hub, and then the COs or data centers.
Yeah, so data centers, so this is where it gets interesting. So data centers, obviously we talk about, big cloud data centers by
Yeah. Is that what you meant by data center was cloud provider?
well, and then also enterprises can have data centers as well, right?
Yeah, but I think I agree, but I think there's a difference between a Google, Facebook data center versus a data center for, IBM or whatever your favorite campus enterprise would be.
I'm not so sure that's true, because I look at kind of the requirements we build for data centers, and they tend to have at least this temperature range. Maybe there's differentiation on some other attributes and stuff, but
Yeah, well, I'm saying I don't think the cloud providers have as stringent of environmental as an enterprise data center.
yeah. And so part of what I put in here in the red, these are kind of some options
Yep.
seen, and you can see this thing called ASHRAE, which is an organization
Yeah.
specifies stuff, right?
Yep.
So I included that in here as information for discussion. One of the most interesting conversations I had was, or I heard recently was, it was either Google or Meta or one of the big cloud operators says they want their switch products specified at 0 to 40 degrees C.
Yep.
And because what happens is if they get up to even like 30 or 35 degrees C ambient in the building, they start shutting down other things that are even more temperature sensitive, right? So like storage in particular, maybe some of their GPU servers and stuff. So they'll start pulling that stuff offline, but they want the network to keep running, because that's what keeps everything alive.
Yeah. So they have to have higher availability essentially.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a nuance. I'm not quite sure how to capture that, because even here, for data center, ASHRAE says actually 5 to 40 degrees C is kind of their kind of
Right.
range. So data center, even enterprise data centers, I think fit into that. This was enterprise. I think this was more
Your branch offices.
yeah. And clear, so kind of the differentiator here is the ones in column C and to the right are all non-data center, right? That's kind of the idea.
Okay.
In the telco space, you can see here telco indoor and even telco out, the climate controlled outdoor. Those requirements for temperature are exactly the same. Partially climate controlled and uncontrolled, you get these higher temperature environments for products. Factory warehouse is actually something was also specified by ASHRAE, and again, it's 5 to 40 degrees C. Maybe there's a different temperature range that makes sense there. And then the other two, unsure. Do you know where we go find information about kind of the retail edge? Is retail edge anything more than?
Well, I was wondering if we might can pull some of that from that RFP that
Oh, the Amazon Edge
Target did.
Oh yeah.
right? Because they,
The target, yeah,
and I
that
think
target
that's in
point.
the campus branch network or whatever.
I think I remember that. I think, actually, I think Celestica did a version of that.
Yeah, you did. Like there was that was more of a switch box that went ahead of some compute boxes though.
Well, it was a switch. It was an access box, right? So it was a
Right.
switch. It also had modules for Wi-Fi and for 5G and all sorts of different connectivity options to get your, your retail edge
Right.
location
That's
connected
right.
back into your network and stuff. So
Right.
yeah, I remember the pictures of that with, kind of a standard switch with little modules sticking out with antennas on it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I go look at that. I can go look at what Celestica specified. I think there's a couple others that actually built to that specification. So,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
that's an OCP spec, but I'm saying that Target did an RFP or RFI
Ah,
for their stores.
yeah,
I think they included the data centers uh and the stores. And it was basically an open RFP that was given out to really all the OCP people. And I want to say Archna like really kind of spearheaded it for them.
did they contribute that to OCP or is it a contributed
Well,
document?
yeah, I mean, I don't know what you would I don't know how you would I'm not sure what category an RFP fits in, but
Yeah,
it was certainly distributed to all of the
yeah.
OCP suppliers.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And so I'm pretty sure it's public. It's a public document though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we can go
I-
look for it.
yeah, because it was like an OCP effort to help Target when they first started in their OCP journey.
So any questions about the kind of deployment environments identified here?
Yeah, no, I know on the Edge call, I forget his name, but he was all wanting to talk about the Linux Foundation's Edge. Well, I mean, they didn't really go into data centers and stuff, but there's a document that I'll look up and send it to you. It's another pointer, so we might could include some of their categories or make sure that we have categories. We don't have to do the same categories they do, right? Because our focus is a little bit different, but we should make sure that, that we include the appropriate environments.
Yeah, if they describe environments that are outside kind of data center, then we'd want to take a look at that and see if it maps into anything on here or if there's something
Yeah,
different.
and I want to say that they took an approach of there was like the provider edge and then the customer edge, and the customer edge ended up really kind of looking like the branch office of the enterprise. And and then they would
That sounds like a more of a logical partition than a deployment partition.
yeah. Yeah, they all kind of I mean, it's the Linux Foundation, so they're
Yeah,
obviously concerned with the software, but still we should make sure that we've covered the environmental
yeah,
kind of things that we're doing for those. And like I said, there was a guy in the and I'm sorry his name escaped me. John might remember, but he participates in the Edge group, and so I think we've asked him a couple of times if he would be interested in making a taxonomy like this.
Yeah.
I think he would be a contributor for sure. He would
sounds
be,
good.
yeah.
When's the next Edge meeting?
I think it's on the 8th.
Tuesday. Next week, Tuesday.
Next week, Tuesday. Okay.
Yeah. I think the telco was on the first Thursday and the Edge is the second Tuesday.
Okay. Um, so then quickly going down column A, you can kind of see the things I pulled out as being of interest
Yep.
here.
Oh yeah.
Here. It turns out there's some cold start requirements. So you get into some of these other environments, and there's expectations about, yeah, it can operate at that temperature, but it also has to boot
Right.
at temperatures.
Yeah. Like the storage temperature versus the power on.
Yeah, and I've seen that before where you have a product that's operating just fine up and down temperature ranges and stuff as long as it's operating, but then you put it at like 0 degrees C and it can't boot.
Right. And one of the things too, I think we need to, there might be a couple of other big categories, and that would be like the side of the rail, because we have that Railway Baltica stuff,
Yeah,
and also the ship, and then it would be cool to have the space as well.
Yeah, and
yeah.
then there's also a lot of stuff that's happening with trains with this positive train control and stuff like that.
What would you mention? Rail ship?
Yeah, I don't know if I would just say transportation, but there's really kind of couple of things, John. Now, so I was talking about the side of the rail, and now John has just brought up on the train,
Exactly.
and then we have the ships.
Marine kind of stuff.
Yep, and then we have the satellites. These are things that have been talked about in our various groups.
I was going to say airplane.
And we haven't had any air, but like planes, but
Yeah,
you start getting into vibrations and stuff. In addition, like I know the rail side was highly dependent on the vibrations because of the trains going past it.
yeah.
But then, I know that we've done environmental, the place that did our seismic testing, one of the rigs they had set up was airplane electronics that were in an airplane, and it was
Yeah,
real high vibration thing to
I
simulate
think high vibration and
at
least according to my experience,
high frequency, right? Yeah,
shock.
right. Yeah, the drop in altitude drop or whatever, and
Yeah,
then but
yeah.
this seemed to be more like just a cruising, because it was I didn't see the whole suite, but while we were there, that was just kind of sitting over there on the side on a different test rig running.
No, I think that those are some good areas to research and again see if they're unique environments, especially
Yeah.
compared to like outdoor telco, right, or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say some of these environments are even probably been more demanding than telco, right? But
Oh yeah.
If you're talking airlines, you got RF shielding and
our satellite got
Alpha
that's pretty rugged stuff there.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept because satellites in terms of internet, they're you may think of them as edge devices and stuff, but
Right. That's right.
They're really in the middle of the network.
Right. And there's that there's a satellite cell phone company as well now, but they just launched their couple of their satellites.
There's a ton of the low Earth orbit satellites, right? So
right.
Starlink,
and then
Starlink
Nokia just put a 5G installation on the moon on one of those, so there's now a 5G station on the moon for the things to be able to talk to each other.
Yeah. Those are all edge locations for sure. Maybe
Yeah,
not,
that's
maybe
the far edge,
far edge,
far edge.
maybe not a big market for
Yeah,
products in space, but
yeah,
so closer airflow. So a lot of front to back to front. Telco indoor tends to be one direction. Telco outdoor can include side to side. Relative humidity. And you can see kind of the two there in terms of typically a lot of products spec 5 to 95. ASHRAE says 8 to 85. And even here 8 to 80. And I think they have a low percentage because if you get much lower than, I think they say if you get lower than 8%, you're more subject to static shock problem. Operating altitude, a lot of stuff 0 to 6,000 feet. Some stuff, which is still weird, which is up to 10,000 feet, but then derated above 900 meters or something like that. So there's all sorts of things that
yeah,
are applied weirdly here. All the telco stuff looks like it's 0 to 6,000, quite frankly, 6,000 feet. And I know 6,000 feet is chosen because that gets you to include Denver.
yeah. Well, it doesn't include the mountains of 14,
Yeah,
but I don't know what the Continental Divide or whatever. There's a cell
that's
site
12,
along
yeah,
the
12, 13,
interstate.
14,000 and stuff. So
Yeah, I think that's 12 though.
yeah, I've never seen any product actually specified more than, for altitude more than 10,000 feet.
Yeah,
Environmental, this was supposed to capture the shock and vibration in particular. This needs a little bit more work, I think.
yeah, and we may want to include the ETSI specs
Yeah,
as well. Some of like the European folks and stuff include that rather than NEBs. Sometimes they'll do both, even, right?
yep. Although people will design products to superset, right?
Yeah. Or whichever one had the better or the worse of the two.
Better, either the worst or the easiest, depending on your.
Yeah.
Earthquake. That's a particular part of the shock vibration test stuff, but it is usually separate, right?
Yeah, I think that's I think there's a NEBS requirement for that.
Yeah, that's included in 63 for
Okay.
different levels. US levels, anyways, North America levels 1 through 4. And then
Right.
in Europe, they're different, but
On your altitude numbers, ZTE has some equipment installed at 5,000 meters.
15,000 feet.
Nice.
16,600 feet.
The question there is, what's the ambient temperature spec on those products at that range? I imagine it doesn't get much above 20 degrees C at that temperature or at that height, at that altitude.
Yeah, was it
Yeah, I don't see anything in the article about temperature.
2 or 4 degrees per 1,000 feet or something?
Yeah, you can see
I forget what it was from my pilot days.
the derating spec here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty typical that you specify a maximum, but then you derate the ambient temperature above a certain altitude. Mostly they account for the change in density of the air, right?
Yep.
Power, I got a couple of column or rows here for power just to show some different variations on it. but this is clearly, data centers usually AC or high voltage DC. Telco is typically 48 volts DC, although sometimes they use AC in some locations and stuff.
What do those power levels refer to, maximums?
Those are
Power.
actually, that's a good question. Typically that's kind of the standard connectors for those products in terms of how much power can go into a product. So their product design constraints based upon typically used connectors for AC power cords.
So basically, the equipment they're used to putting in there that would be other than their standard communication equipment, which draws way more power than that. This would be ancillary equipment for signal transfer and things like that, I suppose. But that would change if we start putting a lot more compute gear at these facilities. It could be as much as you want, right? Whether it's 48 volt DC or AC. And also there you've got, at least for the central office, your 400 to 480 3-phase. It's pretty standard for the large offices.
So those get converted down.
400 volts DC as well.
Yeah, that's coming around. Yeah, 400 to 800.
And so the question is, so this is from a product design point of view. So those voltages come into those places, but like I think it all gets down converted to 48 volts before it actually gets used by equipment, right?
Most.
Oh yeah.
Anything that needs to be backed up, but you will find even some equipment not readily available in these 48 volt DC, either long lead times or not available at all or more expensive. They'll run on an inverter off of the 48 volt, so it has backup, or they'll put in a small UPS, whatever, you see anything and everything out there.
Yeah.
But again, I think what's happening is the loads outside of the telecom equipment now, the data equipment is growing and growing, and these are especially in the office and ultimately in the remote sites. The load is going to, it's grow in terms of compute equipment versus just the telecom equipment. I was just curious as to what.
Well, I think he was, most of these are like the C21 or C14 connectors, right? So 15 for those that's not the PDU power input, where you may have.
That's what you'd run off of a PDU.
50, yeah. Depending on the rack or whatever, you could have, much more power coming into the PDU, or and the OCP Open Rack has the 48 volt bus bars.
Yeah, I just added that into the data center stuff here because there's a lot more stuff deployed with OBR.
And but it comes in as AC, and then you have it's common to then not go to the 240 volt AC, but to do the next layer up, the 400 volts.
Yeah, and in those instantiations, those PDUs convert that to 48 volt DC to fund or to power the bus bar, right?
Yeah, but that's a positive 48 versus telco that uses neg 48.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess I was looking at that as the facility available energy sources. So yeah, you're right. The 50 volt bus bar in the rack wouldn't be considered that. That's an internal connection point. Whereas the voltage that the rack would be powered from would be considered the facility level.
But in a central office or whatever, you have the power distribution, the battery breaker, BDCBB or whatever your favorite acronym for those things are that the triple alt cables run to, you know, like down the main aisle from the power plant. So I mean,
Right.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure he's talking about the distribution. I think he's talking more about like the, you know, a server, especially in the ashtray case, right? They typically want to talk about the
It's
core. Does it have a
it's
C20, C21, or does it have a 14 or 21?
Does
Okay.
anybody still need above 60 volts? I mean, that's been in telco for like 50 years, but the only place I've ever seen a 60 volt system was in a museum in Germany.
Yeah.
Well, there in the outside plant, there's still some high voltage, plus or minus 190. But that's, you know, across long runs of old copper that they're
Old
using,
copper.
almost like, you know, similar to a power over Ethernet scenario where they're taking the old 48 volt lines and running plus or minus 190 on them at 100 VA max. But
Yeah.
at a radio base station, they're running, since the remote radio units can be very far from the source. We're going a little bit above 60 in some cases, as high as 72. But again, that wouldn't be, unless you're putting some of these servers up on a tower, which may or may not happen. Yeah.
So
wouldn't
much for
necessarily be the
SELV.
case. Right. Yeah. Well, now ourselves, we've stuck with the 60 volts max, protected at 60 volts. But there are some products out there that run it higher than that. And then there's fault managed power that's sometimes used. It's not real popular yet, and that gets up to a pulsed 400 or 380 volt signal. But traditionally,
We have
58 volts is the max that they run the
Yeah,
equipment
Mike,
at.
like I said,
tower site.
we have an OCP white paper on that from Orange. That was doing the 480, I think it was, DC.
Yeah, and there's discussion in the rack and power group about 800 volts DC.
Yep.
My God.
Get your size down. Copper cost.
Yeah. So in particular, like in the thing I've highlighted here, it's, you know, nominally it's a 48 volt DC system, right, for telco. But
Most popular.
the product is designed to handle minus 36 to minus 72 volts DC.
Yeah.
So
And you know, we do have those AT&T's documents that they contributed on the data center when the move, you know, when they had their central office as a data center
they
board or whatever work,
they
you
have
know, they
their
contributed
own
those documents.
variation. They have their own slight variation of NEBs, right?
Yep.
So does Verizon. They're a couple different.
Yeah, everybody's going to have their own take on things for sure.
Then I added these two functionality things here, BMC or timing sync stuff, because
and what about the timing and sync? Yeah. Yeah, and you know, the web scalers are much more into that now. They want to have you know, they're using the PTP precision timing to their servers and stuff to be able to measure network loss and that kind of thing as well. I mean, all kind of compute stuff, any kind of time of day stuff as well, but still. I think there's a whole there may even be an OCP group that's actually focused on timing.
Yeah, there is a group that was doing stuff for data center in particular, I think.
Yep.
That's a TAP group, right?
Yep.
So that was kind of the set of attributes. Is there any, I think, obviously the environmental earthquake needs more work in terms of the shock, vibration, earthquake kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think we could come up with those for the, you know, I think most people worry, what is it? Is it zone 4, Mike?
That's what we've always used.
Yeah, I think that's what ours is as well.
But I think the Verizon and the AT&T and stuff are a little different from each other.
Yeah. I don't know, we can look back at in the telco group, you know, we had the Open Rack version 2 did not have seismic. And so one of the things that the telco group added was a seismic kit for the
Open Rack V2.
Open Rack V2. Yeah. So
Does
I'm
Op-
sure there's more
Does
detail.
Open Rack V3 have seismic?
Do what now?
Does Open Rack V3 have seismic specs?
I'm not sure. I haven't you know, we never had the requirement for a telco to want to have the Open Rack version 3.
Yeah.
The Open Rack version 1, you know, it was a 3-rack joined solution that Facebook had come up with to save money on having double rails between 2 adjacent racks. And so it actually was seismic capable because of the three racks essentially being welded together.
I forgot about that.
And so when they went to version 2 that had the standalone rack, then that wasn't they gave up seismic, and none of the web scalers seemed to care, which was very interesting. See,
Yeah,
they're all in California.
I agree. It does seem kind of weird.
Hey, what do you think about ambient RF requirements?
As in terms of susceptibility or emission?
Or like generation. So like, you know, back when I was doing like central office stuff, the racks we had like, you know, metal grated doors to filter like RF.
Yeah, that's not giving off RF. That's not wanting to be susceptible to RF.
Yeah, both directions. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, normally I think that's the only classification I know of is Class A, Class B, EMC, right?
Yeah, there may be an Etsy thing. We could look back at the Open Edge telco sled had you know, had small holes for that. It may have some detail in there that, you know, like one of the Etsy specs that it was compliant with or something that had the EMF. You know, a lot of systems seem, you know, they'll have either a mesh or some kind of
Faraday cage kind of thing.
The edges of the box and stuff.
Yeah.
You don't really
Yeah,
think
I found a thing for the FCC or for the FAA. I dropped it in the chat there. There's probably more. I was just kind of just doing a quick dig.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do a little bit more looking at EMC. You know, products constrained by emissions from the product, and then products being susceptible to emissions. I think the emissions are what's more usually a difficulty in some of these environments. Although I can imagine that if you get on a, you know, satellite airplanes, you know, some of those other environments up at the top there, that you might have requirements related to susceptibility, right? You don't want your
I could think of a hospital, right? Like if you're in like the
yeah, that's a very good point. That was one of the ones I was actually thinking of in terms of hospital was they got a lot of electronics in hospitals.
Yeah, and then they also have a lot of X-ray machines and
Yeah.
and MRI machines and that kind of stuff.
Okay, let's do this. Okay, so kind of captured both aspects of that EM stuff. All right, I think that's about it for today, unless there's more comments, questions. We will work through this for the next few days. Either I'll do some more work, and if anybody on the line here wants to, add contributions, you can, send your ideas or things that go in these different squares.
Yeah.
And we'll pick this up again on Tuesday and reshare this with the Edge meeting and
Yeah.
take it from there.
So one last thought. What do you guys think about like magnetic storage, like hard disk and that kind of stuff? Maybe we cover that with the vibrations and the EM.
It's typically vibrations, right? In terms of at least typical hard disk functionality.
Yeah. Well, then also like for magnetic radiation.
Yeah, don't know. I don't know as much about that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's consider those different devices when we look through the environmental and the EM stuff and see if we need to consider those devices since they are kind of unique in the IT infrastructure.
Yeah.
They're not purely solid state, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you all, and we'll reconvene next Tuesday.
Sounds good. Thank you, Lauren. Good job.
Thanks. Talk to you guys later. Have a good day.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.